with this week's program. We're going to put a fair old focus on the Tamania bull sale this week because it's their 50th that they've just had. We're also going to be talking horticulture with Jim Grierson, and Hank is here to talk about ACC and the minefield that it is, but he knows the pathway through. In just a moment or two though, it's animal health, prevention and cure. Winter's hit with a vengeance. Winter feeding, major minefield.
Yeah, it comes with a few issues potentially, and needs to be thought about. I guess it's not just a simple matter of having winter feed there. I think farmers or people using winter feed mechanisms, they've got to have in mind appropriate ways of feeding and mitigating risks, and they do come with risks, and there's a number of them, particularly with the brassica crops. Very traditional risks, getting a little bit better these days with more modern cultivars, but nevertheless we still have to bear in mind a number of issues.
Obviously nitrate poisoning is one.
Nitrate would be the number one because we still see quite a bit of it, and these plants do tend to take up quite a bit of nitrate from the soil. So when we've got if there's been fertiliser applied recently, even to classic pasture species, it's always worth keeping that in mind as far as nitrogen uptake to the plant. Particularly the big risk periods are particularly so after frosted weather, or a period of grey, murky kind of weather where there's been minimal growth rates.
We've had a fair bit of that.
Exactly. So the nitrate gets taken up by the plant, and because of the slower growth rates, it's concentrated in a small area of the leaf or the stalk, and so once we get the following boost, we get the ends of those tips of those plants with very, very high nitrate levels. So it's a very, very good strategy to keep nitrate poisoning in mind as far as a risk and test for it. And there are many paddock side tests available these days. Consult with your veterinarian. They'll keep you on the straight and narrow. There's varying levels of testing. Most veterinary clinics will do it for you themselves, or if we need really very, very accurate levels, then of course samples can go off to the lab to test for. If you're caught short and you find that we've got symptoms, which I'll go over those symptoms now. So basically nitrate poisoning results in a problem where the hemoglobin in the blood can't transport oxygen. So the symptoms we see are akin to asphyxiation, not being able to breathe properly because the oxygen can't get around the body. So we get animals that are blowing heavily, exercise intolerant, can't walk very long without really blowing, and in latter stages collapse. Anyone who's very astute, if you look at the colour of these animals, look at their mucous membranes in their eyes or in their mouth, they turn a kind of a muddy brown sort of colour rather than the nice pink colour that there should be. If you start seeing those minor symptoms, obviously get them off the crop. It doesn't mean the crop's wasted, but we need to look at strategies of feeding that crop safely, and that might mean putting them onto the crop after they've had a belly full of hay, for instance, or straw, making sure there's straw or hay available, and potentially just break feeding for a few hours a day, so we can still make use of the crop without them really hoeing into it and getting large toxic doses.
Because there's nothing you can do to the crop, is there?
Nothing you can do to the crop. Very, very valuable animals. There is a treatment that we can reverse the changes in the blood, but it's expensive and it's very intensive, and so that would generally be reserved to very, very valuable animals, stud bulls, things like that.
You're pushing on brassicas, but you also mentioned in passing grass.
Yep, so grass species do have a problem with nitrates in particular. Ryegrass is well recognised as being high risk for nitrate poisoning under the right conditions. And of course, as far as winter feed goes, we've got to think about preserved pastures such as silage as the classic, and baleage, and if that preserving process hasn't been undertaken correctly, which involves a pickling process really, so in other words acidifying or getting the pH very low in those preserved products, if that pickling hasn't occurred properly and we get a higher pH or not as acidic a preserved feed as we'd like, that again comes with its own risks, including mould growth, but very classically, the classic disease for poorly preserved silage is listeriosis, which is a bacterial condition that animals can get. There's two major issues, major symptoms with those. We can get cerebral or brain related listeriosis, and it's classically called circling disease. So the bug gets in through breaks in the mouth and the gums in the mouth and ascends up the nerves of the brain, and we get an animal that typically will circle and circle and circle and has a very high fever. In recent years, we've seen a number of cases of what we call enteric listeriosis, where we get a diarrhea disease. Typically, sheep are the highest risk, but it can be seen in any ruminant animal. So that's very important to ensure if you are reliant on pickled or preserved pasture for winter feeding or supplemental feeding, to ensure that ensiling process has been done correctly.
Right, so you can test that as well?
Just a pH test, very simple.
Yep. Now, red water once again gets laid at the door of brassicas, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's less common now, but in recent times we have seen some particularly new species of bulb crop that have appeared to be a risk factor here. And so red water results from a chemical in some of these brassica crops that basically results in the red blood cells breaking apart, and so we get loss of hemoglobin. Rather than blood, it's just the red pigment in the blood cell that gets transferred through the kidneys, and we can see the evidence of that in urine. So that's why it's called red water. We get that hemoglobin coming through in the urine. There's a couple of major issues to the animal when that occurs. One is, of course, we're losing red blood cells, so we can get an anemic animal and we can get symptoms very similar to nitrate poisoning, where there's just not enough red blood cells to transport oxygen around. The other problem with red water is that the hemoglobin itself is toxic to the kidney. So if we get really bad cases, these animals can die of kidney failure. So it's always just a good observational thing. If you're seeing these animals blowing, exercise intolerant, and they're on winter feed crops, particularly brassicas, it's well worthwhile keeping that in mind. And if you're looking at these animals and you're seeing them pass water, then maybe just keep a bit of an eye on what the coloration of that urine looks like. It might give us a good indication as to what's going on. But again, another well recognised risk factor with brassica feeding.
Are the plant breeders working on this?
They are, as I said, modern cultivars tend to be much less of a problem, especially for red water. That's a problem where certain species of plant can be selected to not produce that toxic chemical that causes the destruction of the red blood cells. So it's not as prevalent a problem as it was perhaps 20 years ago, but we still see the odd case, yeah.
Are you inoculating against it? I mean,
you can't vaccinate against it. It's a matter of knowing the risks are there and watching for the symptoms, and if they show their ugly head, getting onto things early, mitigating the problem, and feeding the crop in a safer manner. So, okay. Yeah.
Goiter.
Goiter, yeah, and that's another, again, a typical winter feed problem, and again related to root crops and brassica crops. So a number of chemicals in these crops, thiocyanates, they bind up or they block the uptake of iodine, which is typically in normal levels, appropriate levels in the pasture itself. But these chemicals, once they get into the stomach or the rumen of the animal, they bind up the iodine, make it less available, so it can't be uptaken into the animal, and the result is iodine deficiency. And I'm sure many of the viewers will remember in years gone by pictures of people with iodine deficiency and these massive goiters on the neck. Exactly. So what the problem here is, during the winter, pregnant animals. The fetus is particularly susceptible to this, and we get weak or dead animals born typically with a large goiter on the neck, and so it's better to prevent this problem. If you're feeding pregnant animals on brassicas or on bulbous crops, then it's a very good backstop to supplement with iodine, and there's a number of products available, injectable and oral drenching. And again, that's something, if you're looking at feeding particularly pregnant ewes on winter crops, to discuss this matter with your veterinarian, because it can be prevented.
You know, one would wonder why we use brassicas.
Well, I mean, they're very, very good and they have traditionally been exceptionally good at filling that little gap during the winter months, particularly in the southern areas of New Zealand, where there is virtually no pasture growth. And so they're very, very useful, and if they're managed well, they're very, very good. And please don't think that there's epidemics of brassica or winter feed related disease. There's not, but it is a risk that's there, and I think it's important that just people keep it in mind. It's certainly I'm not advocating, you know, worrying people about winter feed crops, but certainly just do your homework on it, and they can be fed appropriately and very useful.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. And no, I don't think it is an excuse for small boys to not eat their cabbage at dinner time. Tamania's 50th bull sale has just been held. It was a cracker, but let's first meet the studmaster, who is Will Wilding.
Alrighty, Will, so just give me a brief overview of what's happening here today.
So today's our main bull sale. It's a 2-year-old sale. It's our 50th on-farm auction, so it's sort of a double banger, a special day for us, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it must be really exciting for you guys to be at the 50th one.
Yeah, 50th on-farm, yeah, it's a pretty good milestone to get to, yeah.
And what's on offer here today? What's the lineup looking like?
We've got 113 2-year-old bulls. It's pretty happy with what we've put up, so come through quite hard sort of selection to make this final lineup, so yeah, we're pretty pleased with what we've got, yeah.
And now that you've mentioned the selection, can you take me through a bit about the selection process?
So we have about, we're carving, this year we're going to carve 560 cows. Last year we carved 500, so it's roughly half them born bull calves, and so then they come through, we select some of those calves to be in the yearling sale in October, and they'll be selected for calving ease and heifer mating, so they'll be used over yearling heifers. And then what's left from that, we'll select bulls to make the 2-year-old sale, and any that aren't up to the criteria or not good enough and things like that, they'll become cull bulls. Yeah, so we have about 250 born. We'll put up roughly 120. Yeah.
Okay. And for people who aren't quite sure what's going on, can you take me through what is it that people are looking for?
So people here buying bulls for their own commercial herds, so they'll to use in commercial cows, so we'll breed them and collect all the performance data about growth rates, birth weights, calving ease, carcass data and things like that, and then we'll present them to the clients so they can make decisions based on what will be profitable for them to use in their commercial cows and take their herds forward.
So how big is this day out of the year for you guys?
This is our income for the year. Yeah, we have smaller bull sale in October, but this is the big day, yeah.
Big kahuna, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. That's a day we don't want to stuff up, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And you were just saying earlier that you're expecting quite a few people through.
Yeah, some years we get 300 to 400, so I'm not sure how many are here yet, but there's quite a few already here, yeah.
Awesome, cool. And how's the recent season been?
We're good now. March was a turnaround for us. We had 3 summers of drought and dry winters up till that. In March we had similar rainfall to the 12 months before that, so that was the drought breaker for us, and since then it's best autumn we've ever had. It's been amazing, yeah.
Awesome. And why is it that bulls are so well shifted onto other farms?
So well shifted onto other farms. I'd say clients have a lot of confidence in what we're doing. We've got quite a lot of depth in our breeding program, and a lot of females to select from, and a lot of selection pressure. Like, we run the bulls in large groups right up until 600-day weights, and then start breaking them down. So February's when we start breaking the groups down to smaller groups. So yeah, they have a lot of pressure put on them to stand out and make the final cut. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, it looks like it's going to be a good day for it, so good luck.
Yeah, I know, thank you very much.
Jim, you wanted frosts and you wanted started rain. You've got them both.
Got them both. Had the rain nice and early, really, and we're really enjoying having that because it's set up the moisture underneath. It's still dry well down, but it's got enough moisture there now for those residual herbicides I talked about last time, Rob, getting into that ground, adhering to the soil particles and actually working through the winter and into the early spring. So a good result there. And of course now we're starting to get some punchy frost after the snow going on the mountains. So I'm sure the ski people will be happy, and we're going to certainly be happy because it brings all the bushes and the fruit trees into a true dormancy. And this is the time that the programs, in terms of pruning programs go, and regimes will really start to play in earnest. Central Otago, they've been doing it for a week or two because they've got a bit colder down there. But you know, up north, Nelson, they're now looking towards getting right into their pruning regimes, and the dormants are starting to become, the buds are starting to become very dormant. So good time to start.
What about the Hawke's Bay though? I mean, they don't get the frosts that we get, do they?
Well, they do. They get them, and they get them a little earlier than we do. Actually, funny enough, they've got a very dry, cold frost type condition up there at this time of the year, and they're away because their stone fruit will start to move in July, and so they have to have that all done and dusted by this month, and they will have. You know, you generally have a little bit earlier and colder temperatures in the May period, where we sometimes are still thinking it's halfway through the autumn. So yeah, they do get the chilling that's required for their particular crops that are up there. Grapes can go right the way through until September, October. And some of the vineyards actually delay the varieties to step a variety into different time slots in terms of harvest, and also by delaying the pruning of a crop, it means its bud burst is going to be later, so therefore it's going to be harvesting a wee bit later, or into a pocket that they want that variety to come into. So there's a lot of management and a lot of reasons why we have to look very hard at how we go about our pruning regimes, because it sets up next year's crop and even into the following year's crop on what we are doing in terms of what we call main cuts. We might be quite heavy in one variety and prune really hard, and that'll create a lot of water shoots which we're going to remove in the summer. But it's all about the strategic plan of setting good wood that have got a good amount of buds on for crops going forward.
You astounded me, because I just thought you'd sort of start at one end of the vineyard and work your way through to the other.
No, they do it by variety, and they do it by block even, and within those varieties. So it's all about, and some blocks, say it's Savvy Blanc to be easy, and that block down on that terrace there is warmer than this one up here, and so that helps to determine their pruning regime, and also how their buds break in the springtime.
So it's years of research and experience, I guess.
Well, it's years of experience, really. It's not so much research. I mean, I suppose it is gathering data and thinking, well, now block A behaves like this, and we should be pruning that by the end of July, and block C, well, we can leave that until September, and it could be the same variety, but on the same vineyard, but in a different aspect, and that does make quite a big difference, as it does for apples, and especially varieties in apples. The ones that break bud first, you prune later. The ones that break bud early, you prune. The ones that break bud early, you prune as late as you possibly can to delay that bud break. And the ones that break their buds later, you prune them earlier.
Okay, so you're basically getting the blossom all at about the same time.
Well, you're actually still staggering the varieties, but you do determine with that regime. If you go and prune a Braeburn, for instance, which is an early bloomer, too early, it'll think, oh well, I'm pruned, I'm ready to go. If you get a few warm days in July, it'll start to break bud. You don't want it to break bud in July. You want it to break bud in mid-August. So you prune it early August, even as close as that, even with some buds actually breaking, or what we call at pink tip. And that's the buds just starting to break, and you can actually give them a prune then. They get a bit annoyed about it, and they slow down a little bit, because otherwise they could be breaking bud, beautiful nice blossom, and along comes a stray lemon spring frost and nails it. So and that can still happen, of course, but that's.
But then that's when we bring copper in.
Well, that's right. You have those copper and those sulphur regimes, whatever it may be. And at the moment, there's a lot of scale out there. And I don't get to mention it last month, but there's a lot of scale out there in apples and also in bush crops such as the berry fruits and what have you. And the idea now is to go in this next month in July and spray mineral oil about 2%, 2 to 4%, depending on the variety, and some copper with that, and that'll really nail those and get those out of the road. So they'll follow that after they're pruned. So they'll prune off what they don't require, then go over with a spray and clean them up. So yeah, no, good strategy.
I want to talk to you about sprays, OSH, and behaving yourselves.
Well, you know, I mean, we have improved over the years tremendously, but the rules keep changing, and we're wanting. The requirement is to be cleaner and greener. The manufacturer have been working hard on compounds that aren't anywhere near as aggressive in terms of regarding safety of either the user or the consumer, but they are looking at user-friendly types, so that how you go about mixing them and that sort of thing is much easier these days. And they are, although they still give a robust result, they aren't the toxic substances they used to be by any stretch of imagination. Having said that, Rob, there is no reason to be complacent. You have to make sure your staff are familiar with what they're dealing with and rug up accordingly. Gloves, masks, appropriate clothing, and especially when it comes to mixing. The times I've seen it over the years where people get in and mix their chemical, it's the most dangerous time because you're that close to a concentrated amount of compound.
And you're breathing.
You're breathing, probably just going to put your smoke out, which you shouldn't be doing anyway. That's an old thing, it's not so much today, I have to say.
Yeah, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and then, hang on, I've got to get the mask on, I'm away spraying. So I put my gear on and away I go spraying. Put your blooming gear on before you go spraying. Now, some of that gear is not appropriate to use when you're mixing, so you put different type of gear on. So you get your mixing gear, and then you got your application gear. And I mean, the clothing's the same, but you know, a mask or a helmet or whatever you may use is usually quite different. These days we've got air-conditioned, we compressed cabins, so the grower can actually sit inside there looking normal, but he's actually in a great big spray suit. They're expensive, or you can actually put a helmet on that creates an environment within the breathing area, and it sorts out all the impurities in the cabin of the tractor. So you can use that, or if you're in an open air, you use one of those helmets anyway. So those days and then you just use a mask when you go to actually mix the material. As long as you've got your gloves on, you're going to be fine. The other part of this whole equation is the disposal of the empty containers when they're finished. Now, a lot of the materials now are what we call WDGs, so they're a dry granule, wettable dry granule. So they're dry, they're a granule, they put water on, they turn into a solution. But they come in a plastic breathable bag, which actually can go into the tank and it actually dissolves. There are a number of those now, or because you haven't got any plastic, or it's cardboard, which is combustible, and you can burn the package afterwards. So those are the innovations that have gone away from the old metal cans that used to rust and leak and all that sort of stuff and end up in a heap in the corner of the orchard, or maybe that is a real no-no these days. And growers have been very responsible for that, and of course they are checked and audited.
I was going to say, it's not actually necessarily voluntary.
No, but I would have to say, if I can pump one for the growers, I think most of them are very responsible now. They understand the implications if it goes wrong, and the Labor Department don't take prisoners. They're hard work, and if you conform, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's the bottom rule, isn't it?
Oh,
if you obey the rules,
Yep.
you've got nothing to fear about.
Drive at 120, you get a ticket for exceeding 100. Quite simple, really. Drive at 99, you're right. Same principle.
But it is the same principle.
Yeah.
But seriously, growers are taking it seriously now.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a lot more training going on, and there's also, I mean, there can be the farmer, then it can be the manager, then it can be the worker. So we've got to make sure that link is all ticked off. In fact, guys have got to actually report on what they do. If they train a person, they've got to say, yes, they've taken Rob through that, and they give the tick, and he's got to sign the bottom of the sheet. So it's quite transparent. So when and if quality assurer come along to just say, we would like to do an audit on you, you pull out these sheets and say, well, there's Jim, he's fully qualified and he's done this and done that, that's fine, good as gold. It's not hard work, it's just a process and a system that just makes these things work much, much better and safer for everybody.
We've come a long way from sploshing it around in the old days, haven't we?
Heck yeah, I can remember way back in the 80s, and with guys spraying in shorts and shirts, short sleeve shirts, and perspiring and wondering why they were feeling a bit of a headache, a bit crook at the end of the day. And I used to be out there in similar clothing, to be honest, going to see them and talking about these things. So you know, it's a whole evolution.
It is, but it's a great one, Jim. Thank you very much indeed.
Good job, Rob.
As we've been saying about the Tamania bull sale, it's been a biggie, but let's catch up with one of the auctioneers and find out how the season has been going for this year.
Okay, John, so how's the recent season been?
Season's been very good, Tanya. We're probably seeing as many people travelling around as I can remember, wanting to buy bulls of all breeds, because we're in such a sweet spot for beef at the moment. Historically, the prices we've never seen before. Everything's positive. We've got grass under our feet, especially in North Canterbury, where we haven't had it for a long, long time. So we're seeing people just starting to rebuild their herds, and because they've got a little bit of extra money in their pocket from good calf sales, and if you're fattening cattle, the $1,500 to $2,000 is achievable. So they're going out and spending a little bit more money buying, but as good a bull as they can afford. Everybody's got different budgets. Some people have only got 4 or 5, some have got 8 or 10. So yeah, it's just a really good time to be involved in beef.
Awesome. What a line. And can you take me through a little bit today what things are looking like from your perspective?
Oh, excellent. I've been selling here for 20 odd years now, and this would be as good a crowd as I've seen for a long time, for the reasons I've just mentioned. But look, it's their 50th sale, and that brings people out. Our farming community is supportive of events like this, and they've come out in force, and we expect a really good sale. The bulls are fantastic. Will's done an amazing job in getting them up. He really has. There's a couple of bloodlines that have been introduced in Reality and Chisholm that have really clicked with the Tamania cows, and they'll sell very well, I feel.
Awesome. It's a cracker day for it as well.
Oh, it's just a perfect part of the world. We just want to keep it a secret. After days like this, we'll just keep it a secret.
And back to beef prices in general, they're looking quite good at the moment, aren't they?
Beef price has never been better. In real terms, we're getting $6 odd a kilo. Last year it was probably $5.70. The year before was probably only $5.20 or $30. But in those 2 or 3 previous years, we had no grass. Now everyone's got grass, so they can maximise their profits by getting their cattle heavier, and that's why people come to these high performance herds like this, because they can get a good feel of the background of the animal through the EBVs and the performance data. So they know that if they buy this bull here, for example, and they feed it well, it's going to express right out in high growth especially. So that pays more bills than anything.
And what about the demand?
Huge. Well, it's shit. Look, we haven't had the sale yet, but as I said, we've got a good crowd in. We know there's buyers here, and it'll be a solid sale. Yeah, and when we talk afterwards, we'll tell you what it's like, what it went like. Yeah.
And just lastly, can you tell me what breeds are selling better than others?
Well, everyone's benefiting across the board of all breeds, but there's more black cows in the country than any other breed, so the demand for blacks is very, very good. We've had some really good Hereford sales. We've had Hereford sales up to 40-odd thousand in the South Island that we haven't achieved with Angus cattle yet, so time will tell. So they're getting a real benefit too through the Hereford herd.
Big day for these guys as well, being 50 years.
50 years. It's always a big day because it's a culmination of 50 of a year's work. So like this day is just the 2 hours that we get to sell the cattle is a completion of a whole year's work and dedication. Yeah.
The blink of an eye.
Blink of an eye, exactly.
Well, thanks, John. Good luck with the sale.
Pleasure. Thank you.
ACC, that takes up a lot of your time because it's pretty complicated.
Yes, it is. It doesn't need to be complicated, but it's complicated because a lot of people don't understand it, nor do they necessarily need to. That's why we have people such as myself and accountants who have an understanding of how the ACC system works. So for people who are self-employed, people who have their own business, they really should take advice around their ACC and should do it very early on, because it's quite important to set the standard right at the start, because otherwise they could get caught later when they have an ACC claim, or alternatively could be paying far too much in their levies.
You've just hit the nail on the head when you said far too much, because you've got everybody sitting in the front of their chair now wanting to know how you can reduce what you're paying.
Yeah. Once again, a lot of people who are self-employed get an ACC bill after their
end of year accounts come in. So what essentially happens is you send all your receipts to the accountant who does your annual accounts. That then you have a meeting with him and he says, oh, you've had a good year, you need to pay this amount of tax. That then goes to the IRD, and the IRD then by default send that to ACC, and you're billed based on the bottom line of your business or your own income or your income allocation. And you get a bill based on that. And it's also...
This is for personal
and business. So it's based on your bottom line. It's about income. So it's not about how you derive that income or the money that comes in at the top end. It's all about what's at the bottom. I'll try and give you an example. If you bring into your business, say, $100,000 of gross revenue, and during the year you have $50,000 worth of expenses, that might be all sorts of stuff, including depreciation, everything, and so you pay tax on the $50,000. Yeah.
Yep.
So that then is passed on to ACC, and ACC bill you based on an income of $50,000, not the $100,000 that you've actually brought in, because part of that has been mitigated for a whole lot of reasons. That's how you create your income. That's the service that you provide, but you are levied on that 50,000. So if you come to a point where you need some income compensation because you've had an accident and you go to ACC will only pay you 80% of what you've paid your levies on, which is the 50,000, and it's taxed before you get it. Yes. So that's fine for an employed person because they essentially get 80% of what they would take home anyway, because it's based on their income, but not for a self-employed person. So ACC have said, we understand that doesn't work, and it particularly doesn't work in the rural sector where our income at the top end could be really, really high, but because of a whole lot of factors in creating that, what we actually pay tax on is considerably less. So ACC have said that doesn't work. So ACC have said, you can't not pay it, you must pay ACC levies, but what we'll do is we'll allow you to choose a level of income compensation between a least amount and a highest amount, and you can choose in between there as to how much compensation you want. But it's important to understand that ACC does two things. First of all, it provides medical treatment for your accident. So if you break a leg, you go to hospital, they cast it, doesn't cost you anything. ACC basically pay for that. They provide that because it's acute. You can't wait a month to have your leg set if you break it, because it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So that's part of what ACC does. ACC also provides rehabilitation. It also provides a whole bunch of services. But one of the things that base the levies on is income compensation. So if you as an employee break a leg, you're off work for 6 weeks because you can't work, you can't do your work, ACC will pay you 80% of your income after 1 week. Yeah, so that's income compensation. When you're self-employed, it works very, very much the same. But I think what people don't understand so much is that it's income compensation. For there to be compensation, there must be a loss. If there's no loss, can't compensate. It's logical. So if for example, a shear milker breaks his leg when his cows are dry, when he's not milking, and he's off for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, does that have an impact on his income? Well, you'd argue not.
Well, he's not having an income at that point.
No, he's not. His income is when he's milking cows.
Yeah.
So does he suffer a loss during that period of 8 weeks, 6 weeks, or whatever time it is? Suggest not. So therefore, he's entitled to compensation. He hasn't suffered a loss. No, he's not.
Ooh, okay.
So we've had circumstances where somebody has claimed ACC because they think that that's an entitlement. I've broken my leg, I can't work, I'm entitled to ACC. So they go to ACC and they get a compensation because ACC say, okay, we'll look at your last 12 months. Yes, that's fine, you're entitled to 80% of that, we will pay that for you. End of the year, their accounts go in, hasn't suffered a loss. What do you think ACC do?
Say no.
They not only say no, they say, all that money we've paid you, we want back because you're not entitled to it.
And they've spent it.
Well, in most cases they have, correct. So that it just goes on to their bill. Now, I'm not saying ACC are real mean and stand up with debt collectors on their door. ACC will help people They're not that difficult to deal with. They really are quite good to deal with as long as you tell them and communicate to them.
The other wild card, Hank, is what ACC consider to be needing compensation because it was an accident. Well, the A is accident.
Correct. That's the other. I think critical point is ACC will only pay if it's an accident. Who determines if it's an accident? They do. And they're really simple. If you have an accident, you fall over, you break your leg, it's a specific incident that's happened at a specific time that's caused a specific injury. Really easy to define. That's an accident. But if you've developed a sore back, and you think, jeepers, my back's really sore, you know, that's got to be work related because I'm underneath there putting the things on cows and all sorts of stuff. And so you go to the doctor says, yes, you've got an injury in your back, but you can't define it to a specific time, then it becomes a grey area.
And they love a grey area.
And they'll say it's not an accident. And they could be right, but the onus these days is more on us to show that it is an accident rather than them to show that it isn't, if that makes sense.
Do you come into bat?
Oh, we can do, yes, most definitely. Most definitely. But what we try and do is we try and take ACC out of the picture. Because they're not accidents wholly that stop you from working. It could be an illness. Or it could be that your bad back is degenerative, and quite rightly so, ACC don't have to pay. So what we do is we say, actually, what we want to do is we want to take ACC out of the picture. Because ACC don't give you any certainty. They don't, either on compensation or on whether they take liability. So we generally, and that's not always the case, but generally we take the ACC compensation down to its lowest level, so your levies are down to its lowest level, and then we put a private insurance in place. Now the private insurance doesn't care what causes your inability to work, the criteria is you can't work. That's the difference. Doesn't matter whether it's accident or illness. Doesn't matter whether you're entitled to ACC or not in some cases. We will structure it so that if you can't work, yes. And it creates certainty.
Because certainty, I mean, it must be a huge thing in the back of somebody's mind who are working on the land, lifting stuff, doing whatever they might be doing.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And what's important too is not just the certainty of getting the money, but it's the right amount of money that goes to the right place at the right time. That's what it's about, being able to plan and having some, I guess, some certainty. I'll come back to that word, certainty, that yes, we're going to get this money, it's going to come in at this time, and then we can do some things that are going to assist our business, because it's all about the business.
Very briefly, if somebody's been paying $1,000 for ACC, you drop that right down and then you put in your insurance cover.
Yeah.
Is the premium, would you still be around that 1,000?
Yeah, it varies. ACC determine the levels of levy through risk. So they say a farmer is going to pay a whole lot more than an insurance advisor such as I am because it's less risk. So the levies are different. For the private insurance company, it goes more on age. I'm more likely to have an ailment than somebody who's maybe 25 to 30. So there's a far greater risk with age for private insurance than there is necessarily for accidents. So it just works different.
But it's still a step that you should
Correct.
really look at very solidly.
Absolutely. You should take advice, because at least advice you can make an informed decision and you can create some certainty.
Brilliant. Hank, thank you very much indeed. And I think you'll find that Hank's probably saved you a whole lot of heartache. Now, Tamania, let's go back to Tamania and actually talk to Tim, who's one of the breeder's legends.
Tim, can you talk me through a little bit about what's happening today and why this is a particularly special occasion for you guys?
Oh, well, it's our annual bull sale, but it's also our 50th on-farm sale, so quite a special day. And yeah, we've just, it's the fourth, my two boys are now sort of running the studs, Sam and Will, and so it's fourth generation of carrying the business through, so it's a combination of things. It's good.
Yeah. And how has everything changed since you took it over?
Well, I guess just there's a lot more data available now, and we've obviously increased the numbers quite a lot. That first sale, there was something like 30 bulls catalogued, and this year we have nearly 120, so yeah, significant change in the numbers and also the information available for the buyers.
How have the past 50 years gone for you guys?
Oh no, it's been an interesting journey. The stud was actually started in 1927 with a wedding present to my grandfather of 4 cows, and it's now grown to nearly 2,500 cows with a branch in Australia. So it's it's been pretty exciting sort of development. We're seeing more emphasis on quality beef now and demand for that. So all our genetic programs are around trying to produce better marbling cattle with tenderer meat and things. So it's a lot of changes.
And what do you see for the next part of the future for Tamania?
Oh, the future's going to be really exciting. We're going to have the use of genomics and a lot more technical technology to help analyse cattle and things. I'm not too worried about the development of synthetic meats and things like that, because with past grass-fed beef grown on natural conditioned soils and things, you can't beat it as far as healthy, nutritious, and I think they're going to really struggle to replicate that in the lab. That's for sure.
Yeah, fair enough. What is it that makes Tamania special?
I guess it's our size in a way. I mean, this is the largest Angus bull sale in the country every year, and so we pride ourselves in being able to cull our bulls quite heavily. So only about 50% of them make the sale, and so it's probably the size and I guess the longevity of the backup we try and provide. Yep.
And can you talk me through the breed plan? How did that come about?
Well, breed plan was a technology developed in Armidale in Australia to basically gather up all the performance data on animals. And so because of our relationship with Tamania in Australia, we were the first herd in New Zealand to use breed plan. We sort of did the benchmarking just for the New Zealand cattle, and it's a very, very exciting tool now for breeders. It's they still expect clients and things to look at the bulls structurally and things, but the breed plan with EBV's estimated breeding values, it really does work, and it can help make huge genetic gain.
Are there any special plans for today for the 50th one?
No, pretty much the same really. We've got a band, Cam Scott from down Wanaka way or something, does a bit of western or country rock, I think they call it. So hopefully he'll sort of get everyone going a bit. But we've sort of tried to see if clients would bring their wives and things this year, and so hopefully it'll be a fun day. We're lucky with it anyway.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day for it. Well, good luck and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to the program. Well, Tamania Bull Sale, the 50th one, 117 bulls up for offer. Let's find out how it went.
So John, do you want to give me a bit of a brief wrap-up of the whole sale today?
A brief wrap-up was, it pretty much went a little bit better than what we all thought. We thought with the crowd and the registrations that we'd have a really good sale, and that proved. Those couple of sire lines I mentioned, Reality and Chisholm, they really chased them. They chased Carcass, Starter and IMF, and the good old families that Tamania have had for years and years. And because of the event and the occasion, probably people spent maybe just a bit or two more, and that's all you need, just to stretch a bit out to get the sort of result we did. So overall, I'd say the family would be very, very happy.
Do you have an idea of, on average, how much each one went for?
No, I don't yet, but we'll probably sell 110 at about 8.5, I would think. And that's how it felt. And if it did, that would be probably the stud's best average. Yeah. So but look, the group of bulls were very, very good. Will's done a fantastic job of getting them up and keeping them there, because what you do today, as I said, is a combination of a year's work, and so you can't take your foot off at any stage. So these bulls are on a lifting plane. They presented really well. You can see by the prices at lot 100, 102, 110, and a 115 book means that the depth of the catalogue, the quality was all the way through. Yeah, so happy.
Andy, we're in the middle of winter, and tradition would suggest that people don't list their properties in winter, but how wrong can they be?
Absolutely. If you're ready to list, you're thinking of selling, winter is not a problem or anything to worry about. You should get on the go and start happening, because it takes time to get everything organised. It takes time for it to come along, and a lot of people do hold back, and suddenly there's an influx of properties on spring, so you've got a lot of competition. If you're in the market to sell your property, then start early. Winter's not a problem. Many people, many buyers want to see properties in the winter. That's the low point perhaps, or the cool point, and that's a very important part of their due diligence.
I'm impulsive. I'll be quite honest about that. And if I wanted to sell my little house and buy a block, I'd want to do it now.
Exactly. I think buyers are out there all the time. Some are shy, some are quiet, some like to take a long time to do their study and piece it together. People are very diligent. There's a lot of information on the internet that they can put together, and I'm finding that buyers that come along are well informed. They know what's on the market, they know what's been selling, and you've got to be on your toes and have the information accurate and right. But I think listing in winter is not a problem, and I think people buy all year round. So I think definitely you want to get on with it.
Let's look at the winter, because people do, as I said, say, I'm going to wait until spring when the garden's looking great. But there's the winterisation, isn't there? There's people wanting to see what the mud levels are and all that sort of thing.
Exactly right. Sure, you've got flowers in spring and things come into leaf in spring, and yes, quite clearly gardens can look better at that time of the year, and there's a flourish and a rush in spring. But I think the discerning buyer does want to see a property and get a feel for it over the whole year. Climate's important, especially in the rural sector, no matter what industry or part of the industry you're involved in. So seeing it in winter isn't a deterrent. I don't think people are going to look at a place in winter and not buy it because it's in winter. I may stand to be corrected on the odd case, but majority, I think that certainly applies.
Now, what are you getting requests for at the moment?
At the moment, I'm getting a lot of inquiry on the vineyard listings I've got in Waipara, and also people looking for Marlborough. So the vineyards in the wine world is strong, as it has been, and steady. We're also getting inquiry for dairy farms, which is encouraging. We're also getting buyers who want sheep and cattle properties. So in terms of the big rural side of things, yes, there's a strong, steady interest and inquiry we're getting from buyers. Lifestyle blocks, they're on a bit of a low at the moment, a little go slow. I think that winter factor is certainly kicking in the lifestyle department. But once again, I think people who are looking to buy, they're going to buy, they're out looking now. So if you've got buyers vendors who are looking to sell, they should be in touch with their real estate agent and talk about it.
And they should have already been in touch with their accountant and their lawyers.
Absolutely. Keep the team informed as to what's going on, then everyone's poised to act when they need to.
So how long do you plan ahead when you're doing a listing? If I rang you up and said, look, I've got a vineyard, what's the protocol?
Basically, then we are bound to come out and do an appraisal of your property and report that back to you, at which stage we assume that you'll be appropriately wowed by what we tell you and accurately presenting information, that then we'd go about listing the property. So then we would want to get photography done and get all the information together and work out a marketing plan, sit down with you and cost that out. And that's another thing that some people get very scared about. They think they're in for massive amounts of dollars on marketing. There are prudent and strategic costs that you need to incur, and otherwise the internet is a major player in this market. That's where the majority of people are looking, and there are selected other avenues that we would look at as well, but that takes time to put in place and get cracking.
So when do you, as the real estate person, sit down with the accountant and the lawyer to make sure that your story is the same as theirs?
Pretty early on in the piece, we'd like to be in touch with those other professionals and let them know what we're seeing, what we're thinking, and what the dialogue is. It comes down to the client a lot, though, as to their rapport with those professionals. Clearly, there's a cost involved in touching base with those people, but it's a very important cost to incur because they need to be up with the play. You don't want to get a long way down the track and find that there's some impediment. There might be a trust, there might be a company. We've got to make sure we have all the people that need to sign the listing agreement in the first case and a sale and purchase agreement in the second case are aware of what's going on.
And land use consents, Andy, stir that one in now.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Certainly we very early on in the piece do a very thorough search of the property, and we look at the environmental track record and everything that's applicable to it, and make sure that we've got every avenue covered.
You've mentioned vineyards. Now, I said this time of year would be great to list because the new owners are there for the spring.
Absolutely. I mean, we try to have vineyard takeovers at or about the middle of the year if we possibly can, but any time of the year still works. What we need to realise is, though, but as a rule of thumb, the 1st of July is the start of the cycle, so anything that's costed from the 1st of July, starting with pruning, is applicable to the next vintage, and that's when the revenue's coming in. So I'm working on deals at the moment where we strike arrangements between purchaser and vendor with regard to those costs that are being incurred, where a sale's happening into spring.
So you're not just sort of rocking up for open days, are you?
No, and certainly these are business sales as well. And the buyers are discerning. They want to see 3 years of profit and loss reports. They want to see the track record in the case of vineyards of production, and verified production at that. So we need the information, and you've got to keep putting yourself in the same position. If you were buying it, you'd want to see that information, and the more open it is and the more information that's presented, the better it is.
And you've still got time for more listings.
Absolutely, yes, yep. Give us a call, we're ready.
So basically what's moving at the moment is all farming, small block holders, wee bit back,
Yep.
but the big farms and the vineyards are moving.
Yes, definitely. Lifestyle-wise, nationally, things are at a bit of an ebb, but I think that will change, or perhaps even is changing. We in Harcourts have a conference call every Monday morning around the country. All the rural agents that are involved, rural and lifestyle agents, are talking, and we're hearing what's happening. And yeah, there's some signs of action, that's for sure.
Brilliant. Andy, thank you very much indeed. So there you are, don't hang around until spring because you've missed an opportunity. Now, if you'd like to hear what Andy was saying and go over that again, you can go to our website, which is ontheland.co.nz, and plus you get everything else that's been on the program. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed the program, but as I said, you can get it on the website. I'll be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.